welcome to episode 2 of the Unfiltered and Caffeinated and Disease-Ridden podcast. I'm walking down the street and I am sick. Over the last 2 days, a disease has overtaken my body in the shape of a cold, which Natalie and Rowan both had, and I thought I was going to get out of it unscathed, but I'm scathed. It's weird when just your head is sick, but your body's okay. I don't get it. It makes you feel like you're two people. That's the sound of a Red Bull opening, and my life about to get a little more happy. I was thinking about multitasking. They say women are better at it than men, but I don't know. I just think some people are better at it than others, but just people. It's a weird thing, though, because I've heard that there have been studies done that you can't really think about more than one thing at a time, or maybe you can juggle a couple things, and but that really multitasking is the ability to just hop around to certain things, almost like you put a little bookmark in it, or you press pause on something and you're able to dive into something else and then switch back and forth. And I've realized through writing my book and doing some research on how the brain works, not that I'm an expert by any means, but I've just noticed that being an artist and being creative is such it's a task that's a combination of what they call like right brain and left brain thinking. The right side of the brain is more associated with abstract thinking and what's commonly thought of as like creative thought, and the left brain is which controls the right side of the body, but is more associated with words and logic and sort of sequential thinking and stuff. So I think really the key to multitasking seems like it's just that ability to strengthen that connection to those two hemispheres of the brain, and the ability to grow your ability to flip it like a switch. And that's something that's always been like really a focus of mine in writing songs and producing. And I often find myself in a position in collaborations and especially in making my own records, where you have to zoom way into details and then pan way back out and try to see the entire gestalt of something. Is it gestalt or gestalt? I don't know. Sorry about all the sniffing. The. That whole concept is something that's just fascinating to me. And then I think it's a muscle, a metaphorical muscle that you can strengthen. Such as my ability to drive right now while doing a boring podcast. That is a multitasking skill that's rarely needed in life, and that might make me end up dead. But it's not texting and driving. Can you podcast and drive? Are there laws against it? I'm for it. But for example, one of the things I've noticed is sort of the height of that kind of multitasking activity is like producing a vocal and engineering it yourself. It's funny, there's like it used to be that in the old days you'd have a producer who would be sitting maybe on the couch looking good, and then there was an engineer or multiple engineers, a guy running the tape machine, and then a guy setting up the mics and doing setting the preamps and dealing with those technical issues. That's really old school. But even just fairly recently, at the top of the food chain of big records getting made by well-known producers, I would say that somebody like Rick Rubin might be the ultimate sort of the quintessential version of that, which is a guy who isn't turning knobs and isn't doing any of the technical stuff, but he's very much in the guru state of mind where he's like very panned out and giving you is that a good or a bad song? Is this working? Is it not working? Is there passion in the performances? Rather than being so zoomed in that maybe you can't see the forest for the trees. But, I went to some big studios recently, just over the last few years, and they kind of assume that if you're producing something at a big studio or in that kind of situation, that you want somebody to run Pro Tools, for example, while you just produce and stand there or sit there between the speakers, whatever you want to do between the speakers, and press the talk back button and talk to the singer and have somebody else run Pro Tools. And I came up in a period where you're sort of doing everything yourself, like the home studio digital revolution of the 90s and early 2000s. But there were still those holdovers from the big record label days and that generation of producers that is maybe one generation above mine, like the guys that are probably in their late 40s, 50s, even 60s. And I found it so hard. I mean, there was a time where I was in a studio, I think we were working in Red Bull Studios, me and Andy, and doing a session in there, recording some vocals, and there was a guy running Pro Tools, and eventually it was just like easier for me to run Pro Tools and produce the vocal at the same time, because you're so in touch with what's happening and what takes are good and what playlist you're on and how you're keeping in mind which take was good, so you can kind of cut together a comp of the vocal really quickly, which is always inspiring for the singer to hear something kind of as you're going that sounds close to a finished product. And that's extremely difficult to do if that job is split between two people, where one person is in super left brain mode, the other person's in super right brain mode, and you're trying to compile the results into one head or one person's aesthetic or thought process, which is often the producer or the artist. So I think it's just an interesting thought. That whole thing is to think of it as something that you can work on and that you can hone it in. Hold on, I'm going to take a drink of my Red Bull. My friend Julia hates mouth sounds, so if she could hear me drinking that and the slurping and the slobbering and the spit sounds, she would probably throw up. So shout out to Julia Ross, EP in stores now. True Stories Volume 1. Anyways, I say anyways too much. I was editing the last podcast together, and I say so and I say anyways like every 2 seconds. So anyways, I gotta stop doing that. What was I talking about? Right brain, left brain. Yeah. Work on it. It's interesting to be able to take that to virtually any task, to be able to zoom in and then to be able to pan back out and intellectualize something, be completely invested and passionate about it to the point where you're so in it that there's really no other way to look at it. I think that's when you're kind of in that, what do they call it, a flow state, where you just are completely believing in what you're doing. You're lost in it. There's no part of yourself that's watching yourself. I think that's when we get into trouble, is when maybe some percentage, like 80% of yourself, is involved in the task at hand, whether it's producing a vocal, singing a vocal, writing a song, painting a painting, whatever you're doing. And then there's that 20% that's like floating above going, I don't know if that's a good idea, or I wonder what people are going to think, or all that stuff. That's a very dangerous place to be in if you're doing it from a place of insecurity or just lack of confidence. But if you're able to focus 100% of your energy on that right brain activity of just being completely lost in it and subjectively focused, and then when that starts to subside a little bit, as every sort of period of thinking does, you can switch over and be almost entirely in that left brain side, where you're looking at it subjectively and kind of going like, okay, what's the whole picture here? Like, what am I missing? And often when I do that, I'll find little things I might have overlooked, like whether it's little technical mistakes or a little edit that I need to fix or something stupid. Oftentimes I'll be like really in writing a lyric and just focused in on what every word means and what the connections are to how it's going to sing and what it's going to sound like and what the meaning is. And then I'll go into that more logical state of mind, and I'll realize that I've been looking at a page full of typos, and there'll be like a couple words missing that I thought were there. I was like actually seeing them written, and I'll have to just like fix the page up and go like, okay. Or conversely, you're mixing something. I'll be mixing a song and be really inside of it, and then realize maybe my gain structure is whacked out, and it was causing sort of a buildup of a lack of headroom or something. And then I'll fix that and be like, oh wow, the mix opens up, and then I'm able to go back into that flow state, and things sound way better, or have been able to get the results that maybe I was struggling to get while I was thinking less technically. So to think of it that way, just I think once you have it in your head that those two thought processes are possible, and that they are in some ways separate, not completely. That whole idea of brain science of right brain, left brain, they're not mutually exclusive, but it's a real thing. And you can, if you start to become aware of which one you exist in, which one you tend to be in more often than not, or whatever, you can start to exercise that muscle of pulling back and zooming in. Am I belaboring the point? I think I've said a lot about this, and I can move on. But today has been a major day of multitasking for me. I've just been like thinking about this new podcast a little bit. I've been driving around. I've been talking about some new business ventures, some new artist things, some things that are going on that could lead to some fun online ways of doing music. And I met a new person this morning. All things that I'll talk about more as things sort of progress. But then there's a co-writing session today that was set up by our Gannon and I's publisher that I'll be doing. But I'm sick, so I'm going to try to do it remotely so I don't infest them with my disease. So I'm kind of going to be in quarantine, which will be a first for me. Meanwhile, there's lots of stuff going on up at the cabin. My kid is sick, so I've been dealing with snot. I think I was talking about that in the last one too. So multitasking was on my mind, so I thought I'd share that as I drove down the 57 freeway. I'm going to pause now, and I'll see you in a second. Literally. The great thing about avocados that I recently learned, I'm slow on the uptake, but if you cut one in half, you can just squeeze it and basically just make guacamole in the pond of your hand, and then just eat it. You might want to put some salt and maybe some lemon on it, but either way, I had always done too much, laborious cutting in the past with avocados, but once you have a well-ripened but not overly ripe avocado in your hand, you can simply squeeze it. It's just it's like a caveman style accessory, apparatus. What's that called? Appliance. It's called the human hand. Anyways, I was driving and I said anyways again. I was driving and I had a half an avocado in a glass bowl and realized that I could just squeeze it into my mouth and then dump hummus in afterwards, and it tasted good. No need for an appliance or I can't think of words right now. No need for an appliance or a cutlery tool of any kind, or a utensil. How's the word? Sometimes I have days where I see images in my head, but I don't have words as easily. You ever have those days? Maybe it's a right brain, left brain thing. Another note on that, which is, I don't know what it is, but I'm ambidextrous. So I write with my left hand, I throw with my right hand, I kick with my right foot, and I dance with my left foot. No, I just do different things with different sides of my body. And I think that might be part of the thinking also, and the multitasking thing. I wonder about that. I don't know. Not that I'm any more special than just a pure right-handed or left-handed person. Maybe I'm just half as special with each side, creating just one normal person. But either way, my mom's left-handed. My dad's right-handed. My mom has brown eyes and my dad has blue eyes. And that doesn't really relate. But it is interesting that back in the day when you were left-handed, they didn't accept it. There was left hand racism, and they'd force you to write with your right hand, even though you're left-handed. They would just cram you into the right-handed world. This must have been before left-handed scissors. Remember those? They had a different color. But yeah, my mom was forced to write with her right hand. And at some point just said, screw all y'all, and she just went. Now she does write with her left hand, I believe. I think yeah. When was the last time you saw your mom write? I haven't seen my mom write in a long time. It's more texting. That's neither here nor there. But squeeze an avocado and hug your mom. So I was just in a store, and when I was walking out, this lady walked up to me and she said, do you know if there's a Juice place anywhere around here? Let me rephrase that. Do you know if there's a Juice place anywhere around here? And I said, Jews? You want a place that has lots of Jews? And she completely didn't even notice and said, yeah, that place looks like it's going to be $5. Isn't there a 7-Eleven somewhere? And I said, I don't think you're going to find a good juice at a 7-Eleven. And I think she might have been slightly drunk. Or hungover. Or something was wrong with her brain from drinking. And this was just, collateral damage. Did you know that there are only 2 drugs that do permanent long-term brain damage? Don't quote me on this, but something like that. And it's alcohol and I believe methamphetamine. But I would think that acid, what with the flashbacks and all, would also be on that list. I have not done any of those drugs, So I can't really tell you from first-hand experience, but what I can say firsthand is that I heard that secondhand. So, keep that in mind as you go through life, and let it guide you towards making good decisions and not ones that hurt your brain long term. As far as I know, there have been no studies that show that Red Bull hurts your brain long term, or coffee. Although I seem to remember that somebody has said that maybe Red Bull has affected people's hearts, but I believe that's pre-existing conditions. But I also have confirmation bias with regards to Red Bull. I was off the stuff for quite a while, but now I'm back on it, and it inspired this podcast. So however good or bad it is, it's not my fault. It's the fault of a sugary drink with lots of B12 in it. I was so into the stuff before that it's actually one of my wedding pictures with my groomsmen involves me drinking a Red Bull. So that's how deep it goes. So, Mr. Red Bull, if you're out there anywhere, little sponsorship, hook it up. There's one thing I'd like to say, is that I have nothing to say right now, so I'm going to press pause. Alright, I thought of something to say. I was thinking about hope, and how hope with regards to not maybe the super spiritualized definition of hope, but I think the sort of spiritualized yet highly maybe more emotionalized or intellectual, sort of psychological definition of hope, as I'm thinking about it right now, which is sort of just excitement, like one part excitement, one part enthusiasm, 2 parts optimism, and 1 part just a good feeling in your stomach, which I call cool stomach. And I think that really is, like they say in Shawshank Redemption, it's one of the best of things. Hope is the best of things. I think that's what Morgan Freeman says, also known as Red in Shawshank Redemption, which is one of the greatest films of all time, I think. Right next to Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Just kidding. And I was thinking about why is hope so great? Because when I have heard people talk about saying that hope is great, I actually get a little annoyed, and I think, what is hope? Hope isn't even a thing. It's a thing that you think will happen, or that you hope will happen. It's hope. It's like, it's the hope of something. It's not actually something now. I like things that are now, but I also have realized just in the past 60 seconds that hope is now. All the feelings of hope are now, but they're attached to a thing later. And that's why I think it's all about finding a process that you like, because a process leads to a result. At least that's the plan. And if you enjoy a process and you enjoy a result, that's living the good life, right? I think that's why God wants us to hope, or have hope, is that it's something that you have with you now that's psychologically gratifying, intellectually and emotionally gratifying, but puts you in a place of looking ahead, which I guess when you add those 3 things together, that's a spiritual experience. And then when you're completely unaware of a feeling, like when you're in that flow state we were talking about earlier, you kind of wake up after it and go, whoa, that was awesome. And you're sort of reminiscing on a recent history of awesomeness. But when you're really enjoying the present moment, you're actually not aware of the present moment. It's kind of like being humble. You can't really be humble and then be thinking about how humble you are. It makes you instantly not humble. You have to somehow find that sweet spot of just not being not humble. And then when it comes to appreciating life, maybe it's about being either in a state of hope, i.e. a state of an enjoyable process of heading somewhere good, or being completely in the moment and unaware of all of that and just being. How's that? Seems good. I'm saying that because I'm looking at I'm driving by myself and I'm looking at nature. So maybe it's making me sound like a hippie or some kind of mountain man. I don't know, but I do know that there was a time when somebody I knew and that I love very much was going through a hard time and trying to figure out where their life was heading. And I won't name names, but it was a really, really extended, hard period of like, what am I here for? What am I supposed to do? My old dreams are gone. And there was just a lot of grief involved and pain. And I wasn't in that spot. I've been in similar stuck spots, but at that moment I was connected to this idea of having a balanced appreciation for and respect for and commitment to process and result. And so I made up a song for this person, and it goes like this. You gotta find a process that you like. You gotta find a process that you like. Because if you don't find a process that you like, you'll never find a process that you like. You'll never find a process, something like that. You got to find a process that you like, and then you'll be happy, and you'll be kind of fulfilling your, I guess, your purpose on this earth. So I think God gives you gifts, and when you use those gifts, you end up in a process. And then that process creates results, whether it's things, stuff, relationships, whatever it is, and it ends up being good. It's the next day now. It's 9:40, and I just went to a place called Granny's Kitchen. And let me tell you something about Granny's Kitchen. The breakfast sandwich was $9. It better be made from the goose that laid the golden egg and taste like magic. All right. It was a good sandwich, all in all. You know, it had everything you might need in it. It was on a croissant, so maybe that hikes the price up, flying them in from France and whatnot. The lady couldn't work the cash register, so she kept the change. So it was a $10 breakfast croissant. But it kept me nice and full for a long time because it was greasy and gross and tasted amazing. You know what's weird? I've been noticing lately that I actually really like texting with people. And I think it comes from enjoying just the process of writing. I like writing. I feel like I can express myself better through a medium sometimes than I can just through like blabbering, or I don't know. If I have a chance to sort of like just put it down on fake paper on my phone, or that's why I enjoyed, I think, writing my book, or I enjoy writing lyrics and writing songs. But there's this crazy twilight zone that I've experienced multiple times when you're text messaging. And chances are you probably have too. Where you're texting with somebody and it crosses that line between like just, hey, what's up? Okay, see you then. Da, 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 or just stupid jokes and emojis and stuff. And it goes into this, like you try to use text message to figure something out or work something out or explain yourself when there's some kind of tension in the air, like somebody's a little mad or somebody's a little worried or somebody's a little suspicious or you got business to do, and you end up on a text message with like a tone in your text of like, I want to be understood, and you start getting all informational, and suddenly you sound like you're two attorneys in Law and Order or something. Do they have attorneys? I don't know, some Tom Cruise movie where there's lawyers, The Firm, and you're kind of going all factual and like your representative speaking for you rather than just being a normal person. And then all of a sudden there's this tension, and then something happens and it's lost in translation, and then you start to think of that other person and they start to think of you as like this little demon who's like against them, and I don't know what it is, man, but it happens sometimes, and it's like the frog in the boiling water. Have you heard that one? I talk about it a lot, but basically if you put a frog in some water and slowly bring it to a boil, the frog doesn't notice and doesn't jump out because it's happening so slow, and then the frog just dies and boils to death. But then you can eat the frog. But that's what happens, I think, in those situations, is they just slowly get more and more intense until you didn't even realize, but you've chosen that medium to just figure out something that's way too important to not work out, at least over the phone, but better yet in person. So I've kind of made a new mini commitment to trying to notice when something like that is happening, when there's a little bit of a misunderstanding or emotions are running high, and to try to get it onto the phone at least, or talk in person, because it just, man, there's so much information that is lost in just words when you're interacting with somebody. If it's a one-way conversation, like a song or a podcast, obviously it's a completely different thing, or writing a book. But it's the back and forth. We're just, as human beings, I think, just made to get the whole picture. We have to hear inflection. We have to see body language, which is huge. Little twitch of the face, little wrinkle of the eye, little turn up of the on the what you're saying, or the changes everything. You can sense those. You can hear somebody's heart, basically, and see where they're coming from, and get that extra subtext. It's all about subtext, and text is just text. There's much less subtext in that sense. Anyway, that happened to me between yesterday and today, as there was a confusing situation with lots of different layers, and me and my friend were talking back and forth, and sort of a perfect storm of weird circumstances and things, and sort of reading into things maybe too far or whatever, and but we just got off the phone and just kind of worked it out. So that was nice. And now everything's back to normal, and I don't have a little stomach ache in my stomach. Nothing worse than having something weird hanging in the balance with somebody you care about. But, well, maybe traffic is worse than that. I'm sitting in traffic. This sucks. Caffeine. The title of this podcast has really helped me have a podcast. Once I put those two words together, unfiltered and caffeinated, I realize that when I think about doing a podcast, I instantly start filtering and wondering what's up. You know, I don't really sound caffeinated because I think caffeine brings me from an extremely mellow and introverted state to a slightly less mellow and extroverted state. But I feel a lot of energy. I just can tell, I can hear it in my own voice that I don't sound very caffeinated. But I can assure you that I am out of control. I finished my third Red Bull already today, and I'm noticing the old patterns. I gotta be honest with you. There's little crashes in between. There's the initial jolt of amazingness. Then there's that sort of thing, like, it might be a blood sugar thing, because have you ever had a blood sugar crash and your eyes just sort of close halfway, and then you try to open them, but all you can do is raise your eyebrows really hard, but your eyes stay half open? It's a weird phenomenon, but I think it's related to blood sugar. I don't feel particularly bad. I just feel a little bit hazy, but with a really fast heartbeat. Hazy with a heartbeat. Until next time, this has been another podcast. Good night and farewell.